Okay, really gotta shave tomorrow. Not liking this. Not liking it. We came in, really, he said, only to tell you, too, that everything is moving according to our scheme. Has Father decided to lend the council some money? Inquired Cordelia. Paul Trent was too much of a diplomat not to sense far off the electric flicker of opposition. He made a feline movement on the arm of Red's big chair, as if he were a cat preparing to do battle. Nothing is decided yet, he said. We have only been discussing things. What does Mother say? For a second this question nonplussed the man from the Scilly Isles, for it pushed him out of its legal world into his philosophical world. I quite agree with you that a wife's wishes ought to be carefully considered when it comes to any big investment, but I'm afraid in this case... You mean she doesn't agree? Said Cordelia. And I don't wonder either, the girl went on. She hasn't got the least benefit out of Canon Crow's money so far, and now it's all going to be thrown away. Paul Trent leant forward with a flush upon his swarthy cheek and a contraction of his arched eyebrows. Not thrown away, lady, he murmured softly. Not thrown away? He'd still be far the richest man in Glastonbury. Cordelia uttered a spasmodic little laugh, a laugh which caused Mr. Evans to give her a grave and anxious glance. Your father, interjected Dave, and your mother knows that perfectly well, would never touch a penny of his fortune for anything but the good of... He'll be the biggest stockholder in our commune, Miss Cordy, remarked Red Robinson, and his will be the only name what'll be in all the pipers. And never got a half back what he spent on the pageant, said Cordelia. At the word pageant, Mr. Evans gave an involuntary shiver. He thought to himself, with Cordy as my grail messenger, I'm on a better path now. Cuckoo. Miss Crummy told me yourself, protested Red, that 'twere only the 2.5 interested he got from the bank he's spent on that silliness. Interest. That is really true, Miss Mrs. Evans, murmured Dave, staring at her with a puzzled wonder. Why have women, he thought, so much stronger possessive instincts than men? And everybody knows, he went on, fixing his blue eyes steadily upon her, that he's always regarded Canon Crow's money as a trust for the common good. Damn the common good, cried Cordelia impatiently. I don't see what you people have got to do with our money. The rector of Northwold left it to Father without the least restriction. He left it to him because he had his friend. He left it to him because he was his best friend. All his own family have deserted him. Father made those last 10 years of his life the happiest he ever had. Are you really going to Mayor Court today? Inquired Mr. Evans. I've never seen Lord P. Does he appreciate that amazing old house of his? What we came for officially, Evans, said Paul Trent, thinking to himself, I'll make this commune the first real anarchist experiment that's ever been made. And if this moralizing ass Spear is as stupid with men as he seems to be with women, I'll not have much difficulty with him. Was to tell you that if Lord P does sign over to us the leases of his property, your shop, together with nearly all the shops in High Street, will have to deal with us and do your business cooperatively in future. This will mean, he went on hurriedly, noticing an impatient movement from Cordelia, that Glastonbury's tradesmen will pool their profits. Not all their profits, of course. Here he gave a sidelong, cat-like glance at Dave. But the whole idea will be to have as much complete personal liberty as possible, but enough to enable the commune to deal as a unit with the outside world. Mr. Evans' attention had been wandering for some while, and his face had grown animated with a childlike excitement. Glastonbury, he now cried, rising to his feet and beginning to walk up and down the little parlour with long strides. Glastonbury will be like she was before the Tudor devil. And all Welshmen know what the Tudors were. Ruined her independence. Glastonbury will be a living entity again. She will draw a magnetic life from her 3 hills strong enough to attract all the world to her side. She will take her place. He paused and stared gloweringly at Red, who was smoking his pipe in the purple chair with a wry, malicious smile. This pooling of profits is nothing, he went on with a wave of his hand. We must all earn our living, of course, but that's not it. We must free ourselves from Teutonic vandals like the Lord P, of course. But that's not it. We must employ our workers, of course, better than Philip Crow does, but that's not it. The great thing is to revive the old life of Glastonbury herself. The great thing is to revive the old faith in Glastonbury herself as an urbs beta, to which all those who've put themselves outside the pale may be purged in their minds. His voice had risen so vehemently that when he suddenly stopped and plumped down on one of number 2's shakiest chairs so that its gilded back cracked, everyone stared at him in embarrassment. There was a nervous silence in the room. Dave thought to himself, it's the capitalistic system that breeds these eccentrics. When all able-bodied men in Glastonbury work at our municipal dye works, no one will have time to think whether they've purged their minds or not. These nervous maniacs are the results of parasitism. We shall see to it that this fellow works with his hands till he's too tired to think about his manias. Red Robinson looked around for something to spit into, but seeing nothing except the fireplace, which was too far away, he swallowed his saliva with a gulp and crossed his legs in the purple chair. The pint, Mr. Heavens, he remarked grimly, ain't whether Glastonbury's waters can cure the pox, but whether us working chaps can get hold of the Bugers' factories. Father tells me you're an anarchist, Mr. Trent, said Cordelia, attacking with feminine penetration the weak spot in this ambiguous conspiracy. The old weary film of cultivated patience descended upon Dave's blue eyes. Red Robinson struggled to his feet, approached the small coal fire. The parlor of number 5, Oldell's Road, was decidedly chilly, spat angrily into it, and came back to his chair. He doesn't know nothing of anarchy except that name, he jerked out. Nor nobody else neither. 'Tis a bleedin' fancy of such as I've never done a stroke of bleedin' work in their bleedin' lives. Mr. Trent's our lawyer, Red, said Dave quietly. If he's clever enough to make Lord P sell those leases, we at least must compromise a little when it comes to our commune. But Paul Trent had turned to Cordelia and was waiting for an opportunity to speak. Real anarchy, he began, in the most caressing and beguiling voice, as if he had been a young Baghdad silk merchant displaying his wares in a luxurious harem, has never yet been put into practice. Mr. Robinson thinks it a mere fairy tale, but if your town council leases the shop in High Street and takes over the dye works and gives me a chance to make the few laws which... Laws? Cried Red derisively. He's been sighing that we'll all enjoy ourselves and do just what we like, and now he's talking about laws. Cordelia, who had begun to gloat over the effect of her apple of discord, surveyed with astonishment the movement of self-control with which the man from the Scilly Isles patted Red's shoulders and joined in the laugh against himself. If he can do that, she thought, he'll be a match for Lord P and reduce old Beard to nothing. I cannot think, said Mr. Evans gravely, speaking slowly and emphatically, and evidently weighing his words. Then an anarchist commune in Glastonbury is a practical possibility. Pardon me, Mr. Evans, said Paul Trent, but perhaps you spoke just then without altogether realizing how dangerous it is to clash with a man from the Scillies. Or is it Scillies? I don't know. Scillies. Mr. Evans's corrugated countenance broke into a deeply indented smile, and he rose up from his creaking chair and crossed the room and shook hands vigorously with the anarchist. "So you read the authors, too?" he cried. "I never knew it. I never knew it. Think of that! And I never knew it." When Mr. Evans spoke of the authors, he always meant one set of authors, those, namely, that dealt with Cymric mythology and Cymric superstition. He dropped the young lawyer's hand now and turned it to his wife. "Cordelia," he said, "you may mark my words that Lord P. will sell them his land. Mr. Trent reads the authors. Mr. Trent knows that it was in the Scillies that the oldest of the gods, Kronos himself, was kept in prison. Mr. Trent knows that since that day it's dangerous to interfere with a man from the Scillies who set his heart on anything." "He don't believe one word, mister, he don't," put in Red, "of thy tales and fables, what you pins your bleeding faith on. He thinks they all be my eye." Red looked maliciously at Mr. Evans. His reference was obviously to Paul Trent, who once more astonished Cordelia by his self-control. "Well," he said, "if our host can't believe my philosophy, and I can't follow his poetry, we can agree at any rate in enjoying your humor, Mr. Robinson." "I don't know whether you realize, Mr. Evans," said Dave Spear. "Mrs. Evans," said Dave Spear, "that your father has decided to put off the opening of his Chalice Hill arch until the end of January, when we hope to have a ceremonious proclamation of the Glastonbury Commune." But in his heart, as he spoke, Dave thought to himself, since the only aspect of this affair of the least historic importance will be its most move towards England becoming communist, I must see to it that the Gazette says nothing of Trent's absurd anarchism. He sighed heavily. It would have been far easier for him to drill and march and keep step and practice rifle shooting than to do all this plotting, but the cause demanded it. His dislike of it was part of the bourgeoisie mentality in him which must be overcome. "You see, Mrs. Evans," broke in Paul Trent in a soft, caressing voice, "this commune of ours, will be a very harmless adventure. We have no intention of bringing the government down on us. And the fact that your father will naturally be the leading spirit in it all will keep politics in the background. His interest is in its entirely religious, if I can use the word. Our friend Spear here thinks of it as an advertisement of communism. I am even more modest. I regard it as a quiet little experiment in philosophical anarchy." Mr. Robinson, whose influence with the laboring elements in our town is so great, is less doctrinaire in his notions. He will be content if I make them big crows sit up and take notice. I hear the blood's bleedin' fizz. I ate the blood's bleedin' fizz." Red added this last remark almost pensively, puffing out such a quantity of smoke that what Cordelia beheld for a purple chair was an artisan's torso, the head covered in a cloud. Well, I'll end it at that. Still discussing the conspiracy. That is the name of the chapter, after all. Until next time, goodbye from Glastonbury. Cheers.